seconds away. In this Studio 5 special, we honor a civil rights icon with people inspired by the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
And that is just about a minute of Martin Luther King Jr.'s mountaintop speech delivered on April 3rd, 1968, just hours before his assassination. And as we mark 50 years since his death, we thought we'd devote this edition of Studio 5 to stories and people whose life work reflect the heart of what Dr. King stood for. And we began with hip-hop artist and Reach Records founder Lecrae. He and artists signed to his label used their platform to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ and to be voices against racism and injustice of any kind. This is a behind-the-scenes look at the music video shoot for Lecrae's Broke, a single from his All Things Work Together project, an album the artist is still touring the world to perform.
Just so much going on. I mean, societally, culturally, natural disasters everywhere. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like definitely it's like, you know, everything lined up well to just be able to tell people there's hope in the middle of the chaos.
And there's no denying the hope the hip hop artist is singing about.
I was trying to get it. I'm in that studio trying to keep it pushing. Patty pies, boy, I kept them cooking. All I needed was the Mary, but the guy in me was having commentary. I got angels all around like I need a baker. Blessings falling in the line, guess I need a taper.
We sit down with him just before he takes the stage at a music festival in South Dakota, celebrating discipleship.
Disciple making, the investment of, you know, what's been deposited into you and to others is a crucial aspect of the faith. It's something that, you know, for us to neglect, I think is criminal and hinders the progress of us, you know, culture making, culture shaping this world that we live in. And so any opportunity to get involved with something where we're continuing that journey of pouring ourselves into others and also encouraging them to pour themselves into others is something that is extremely important and I need to be involved in.
Personally, do you find yourself discipling others?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, I think a lot of us have this idea of discipleship that looks like, you know, you and me sitting at a table with some coffee and a Bible open. But really, if you look at Jesus' life, you know, they walked with him. They were everywhere he was, and it was more about not trying to know what he knew, but to live as he was living, to be as he was. And so I'm constantly having people around me, and discipleship is caught, not taught in a lot of ways, you know. So it's people around you who can catch the vision, who can catch the truth of Scripture and begin to live it out.
That vision catching plays out at the record label Lecrae created, with familiar artists like Andy Mineo, KB, Tadashi, and Trip Lee.
I'm hanging on by a thread, and all I'm clinging to is prayers. And every breath is like a battle. I feel like I ain't come prepared. And death's knocking on the front door. Pain's creeping through the back.
In your life's work and ministry, a lot of people following you. More than 1 million people follow Lecrae on Instagram, 1.5 million on Twitter, and 2 million on Facebook. I imagine you take even that platform seriously in terms of pouring into people.
Absolutely. I think, you know, obviously no one's going to do it perfectly, but there's a sense of trying to steward that well, in a sense of using it to invest in people, using it to inform people about the types of investment that's necessary. And I think there's such a breadth of truth that God has given us that, you know, social media platforms have given us a unique opportunity to dispel all that, to get all of that out there. So hopefully I can do the best I can with it.
Following this violence that unfolded in Charlottesville, Virginia, Lecrae tweeted, offering help to UVA students who no longer felt safe and wanted to transfer. And some took him up on the offer.
One of the things I applaud you for doing is being so outspoken and vocal when it comes to racial issues. But you take a lot of heat. Does that bother you?
I think whenever you stand up for what's right, whenever you stand up for what you firmly believe in, you're going to take some shots, right? And so that's the nature of it. Our Savior was crucified for you know, standing up for truth and for laying his life down for others. And I think blessed are those who are persecuted, you know what I mean? And so I look at it from that perspective, to just love people in spite of it all, and to show people what a picture of unity can look like, a picture of you know, human dignity and love and peace can look like, despite all of that.
Does it hurt when Christians attack like that?
Of course, yeah. I mean, of course. You know, it never feels good, especially coming from Christians, right? But one of the things I had to come to understand is that, you know, each of us are fleshing out a version, so to speak, of Christianity. And when I say that, I mean that obviously there's biblical truth that exists, but yet we forget that a lot of times culture influences how we perceive things, how we flesh things out. And what I have to just realize a lot of times is that there's so many cultural nuances that influence the way faith gets fleshed out, that some people don't realize how culturally influenced they are, and so they're not able to see that, you know, this is not necessarily biblical Christianity. This is more cultural Christianity, but it's okay. I love you, and, you know, hopefully we'll work that out.
Money made me richer, but the struggle got me richer than I ever been. Learn to hustle, use your muscle, learn to grind, and keep your mind up on the future, man.
It's very difficult to process privately as a public figure. And so you're always asked to be on. You're always asked to have be prepared and to be ready to, you know, answer this question or smile. And sometimes, you know, especially when you're grieving or you're frustrated or you're trying to figure stuff out, you don't have an answer or you don't have a smile. But man, God is so good. He's so faithful. And I found just in these last, really even in the last few weeks, even just him speaking through the scriptures and speaking through circumstances. And I was reflecting on Romans 10:11, where it just says, no one who believes in him will be put to shame. And I'm grateful that there's nothing to worry about. You know, he's my banner.
Lecrae's music and life are both inspiring. For more, you should read his book. It is available right now.
And still to come on this Studio 5 special, Marc Leishman is in Augusta for the Masters.
It wasn't looking good. We pretty much got told that she was going to die.
With a miracle story helping to save lives.
And welcome back to this special edition of Studio 5 as we continue our look at real-life heroes whose lives are a reminder of the heart of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 50 years after his death. And that brings us to PGA golfer Marc Leishman, who is in Augusta this week for the Masters tournament, and his wife Audrey, who nearly died 3 years ago. Her miraculous recovery gave birth to a movement to help others who can't afford the care they need to survive.
Leishman at 10, dialed in.
You are a professional golfer ranked in the top 20 in the world.
Marc Leishman, this is 17. He needs it for par. He has it from above the hole. So Leishman holding steady at 11 under.
How does that all start for you? When do you begin golfing?
I played all sports growing up in Australia. I played cricket, Australian rules, football, golf, surfed, tennis, anything with a ball I loved. So I was just the best at golf and enjoyed that the most. Turned out to work out pretty well for us.
Now Leishman for birdie. He's going to close it out with another one. Why not?
Audrey, what's your relationship to golf?
Him. When I met Marc, I didn't know a birdie from a bogey. I've since definitely learned a lot about golf.
Let's roll back to 2015. Are you at the Masters? What's happened? What happens?
Yeah, I was down there the week before just for a practice round, and then I guess, you get the phone call that almost changes your life. It was a pretty scary moment with all the stuff that happened with Audrey. Had to withdraw from the Masters. When you're going through a moment like that or a time like that, it's you need to be where Audrey needs. Well, she really needed me. My kids, there was certainly more important things to do here than be playing a golf tournament.
So you were diagnosed with what?
Sepsis, toxic shock syndrome, and acute respiratory distress syndrome.
That's almost 3 years ago now. Take me back to when you realized something was wrong.
I was having some stomach issues, thought it was just a stomach flu. Lay in bed, rest, recover. That's what I anticipated. I started to get weaker throughout the day, and everyone kept telling me to go to the doctor. At that point, I was running a 102 fever, and my nose started to bleed spontaneously, and that was when I finally started to get a little bit scared. I'll never forget the nurse, after taking my vitals, pushed her chair back, put a mask on, and said, "You're very sick." We later found out that if I hadn't gone to the ER that night, there was a very good chance I wouldn't have woken up the next day. And they made the decision to put me in a coma. I bargained with the doctors. It was about 5 in the morning when they put me into the coma, and I said, can I wait till 7? Can we wait till 7? Because that's when my boys will be up. I wanted to talk to them so badly, and it was hard. I fought them on it. Marc had to make some really tough calls, and but luckily, by the grace of God, I made it through.
Absolutely. You guys feel like you're looking at a miracle?
Yeah, for sure. She wasn't. The odds were heavily weighed against her. When they took her off the breathing machine and all that, off the life support, and as we do that, the curtain had been about this far up, so just let a little bit of light in every day, and it's on a heavy chain, hard to move. As all the doctors were walking out the door, the curtain just falls down, falls about this far, and just bangs on the ground, and we look at each other. It still gives me goosebumps. And I look at the doctor, and he's like, I'm like, what was that? How'd that happen? He goes, I think that was her guardian angel going out the window. I think, yeah, it was our boys certainly needed their mum, and she wanted to be around for it. So I think, our little girl, Eva, we call her our miracle baby, because Audrey didn't look like she was going to be around, and now we've got a beautiful little girl who's going to take after her mum.
What's sustaining both of you during that time?
My kids, my husband. I knew I needed to be here for them.
I think not being able to say goodbye to the kids if things didn't go well, that was part of her, a factor of her surviving, I think. She was, and then, for me, I was, thinking, what's life going to be like with growing up, kids growing up without a mum, me growing up without a wife, how am I going to raise 2 boys? All the while I'm still trying to be positive, thinking, well, she can get through this, but it wasn't looking good. We pretty much got told that she was going to die. So, you go through that, and then she comes out the other side, and you just have a completely new perspective on life. It's pretty awesome. You don't worry about the small things. You appreciate all the little things, that, like, hugging your kids, and I still do, for sure. So that's a positive that's come out of it, along with a few other things. We've started a foundation, and we've helped a lot of people, and I feel like this happened to Audrey because she was strong enough to survive it, and she was the person that was, if she did survive it, wanted to help a lot of people.
I needed to find a purpose. My previous jobs, I had been in service and working to help other people, and once I gave that up, there was a hole in me. And that's something that I've been able to fill with the Beginning End Foundation. We've helped over 2,000 people in just under 3 years. And I can feel proud about that, knowing that we are touching lives and we are spreading awareness, and hopefully by doing that we'll be saving lives.
Let's talk about the foundation. Where was that idea born in your heart? What happened that you said, okay, this is what I can do. This is how I can give back?
Well, when I was being discharged, the nurse came in and she said, this is how much the antibiotics will cost, your home health care. She went through all of it and then said to me, is that okay? And I remember thinking to myself, well, what if it wasn't okay? What if we couldn't afford it? And so that's where our idea of giving out grants to survivors came from. So we give one-time $1,000 grants that can be used towards whatever their most pressing needs are. And the median household income of the families we're helping is less than $12,000 a year. It fills my heart to know that we are even easing someone's stress for one day.
And you're using golf as well to help.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Our Celebrity Classic, that's our main fundraiser, and you know, being a golfer, it seemed like a pretty natural fit to have a golf tournament to raise some money, and got a lot of great players coming in this year. People from all around the world that are coming in and help us raise money for people who really need it.
To learn more about Marc and Audrey's foundation, head to beginagainfoundation.com, where you can help give people a new leash on life.
Still ahead on this Studio 5 special edition.
Get yourself up in spite of what they told you.
Actress, author, and activist Anna Deavere Smith.
And welcome back to Studio 5. Actress, activist, and author Anna Deavere Smith has a one-woman show that captures the heart of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Notes from the Field dramatizes accounts of students, parents, and teachers, as well as administrators, caught in America's school-to-prison pipeline. It's an eye-opening work from a woman who has dedicated her life to opening eyes and starting some much-needed conversation. Here's a look at Notes from the Field.
It is impossible to talk about the criminal justice system without talking about education. Prison don't do nothing but make you a worse person. You want to change, you got to do it by yourself. Even if I didn't make it down the pole, the statement would still be made. It's a movement, and it's not going to stop. Most teenagers get incarcerated, all because of your mouth. It's prison or death. Never lose faith. Keep the faith. We gonna keep demanding justice. A message to Black America. Don't expect nobody to open the door for you. Can't wait for the leaders to make it better. We have to make it better.
So I know that this film, we see and hear 18 voices, but your research was more than 200?
250.
Wow. Tell me about, I guess, what it took to spend that time and gather all those voices.
It took a good team. It took raising money. We went to Northern California, to Stockton, which at the time was a bankrupt city, then up spent some time on the Yurok Reservation with the tribe there. We went to Philly. We went to Baltimore, which is actually my hometown, after the riot that followed the death of Freddie Gray, a young man who was caught on videotape being beaten by police, and it is felt that he died while in police custody. And then I went to South Carolina, to Columbia, Charleston, and up and down what they call the Corridor of Shame, which is a series of towns with very bad schools.
Let's talk about Baltimore, because you have Kevin Moore in this film, and he captured the footage of Freddie Gray. Can you share what happened? We
were literally driving down the street, just driving around West Baltimore, which had been where the sort of epicenter of the riot. And one of the kids in the car, who was a native Baltimorean, said, "I think that's the guy who took the video of Freddie Gray being beaten." So we jumped out of the van, and I talked him into taking an interview, and we walked down the street to the very spot where Freddie Gray was beaten. And so what you see me reenacting in the beginning of Notes from the Field is me walking, him talking to me as I walk down the street with him, asking him basically what happened. And then I had to zoom in to get a closer look on his face. You can see the pain in the man's face, you know what I'm saying? And then they pulled around on Mount Street and they pulled him out again. And they put leg shackles on him. You put leg shackles on a man that could barely walk to the paddy wagon? That don't make sense to me.
Watching it, I'm often moved to tears. What does this do to you to bring these characters to life and share what's happening in our country?
Well, you know, the emotional part, first of all, as an actor, to ask me about emotions would be just like if you ask a drummer about rhythm. That's just a given. I'm supposed to have a well of emotions that I can draw upon. And actually, it's less about how I feel. If I'm successful, it's about how you feel. Have I done something, you know, to cause you to be moved? And that's my goal. I will say that when I was on the road, actually doing the interviews, which is a lot of work in a brief amount of time, that is an emotional experience.
Yeah.
You know, we went in and out of prisons, we went to juvenile halls, and you know, that's a sad thing.
Wow. Is there anything different between you doing this on stage versus doing it on film for us?
Well, in fact, when we filmed it, we just filmed 2 performances. That was it, like straight through.
Wow.
Boom, boom. 1 performance one day without stopping. 1 performance the next day without stopping.
Wow.
What takes a longer time, and which I really, really loved and am desperate to make another film now, is all the preparation, working with the director, extraordinary director, and the time after. I spent the summer in the editing room with Paul Snyder and with Christy Zia, and I love that process. You know, I love that process.
Well, we love you. I love your work. Anna Deavere Smith, we appreciate your time.
Oh, man, I thank you so much, Ephraim, for talking to me.
Notes from the Field is available right now on HBO and other digital platforms.
Up next on this Studio 5 special,
We will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together.
King's dream
I have a dream that enough is enough.
and his granddaughter's vision.
And we are almost out of time for this special edition of Studio 5, so here's a look at what we're working on for you. Come next time.
We'll leave our troubles behind.
Where did the Hunts that we know as a group, where did you guys begin? What happened?
My parents were both musicians, kind of in 2 different worlds, so we grew up with that as kids.
Our troubles behind.
So we call it alternative folk, whatever that might mean. This album, I feel like the whole concept really, we just couldn't get away from that idea of committing to each other no matter what.
And that is just one story from our next rundown. As for the final word for this show, we thought we'd look at Dr. King's unforgettable I Have a Dream speech, but with a twist. You'll also hear from a young dreamer, his granddaughter.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
My grandfather had a dream.
That my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
I have a dream that enough is enough.
Little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
Have you heard? All across the nation.
With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood.
We are going to be a great generation.
We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Unforgettable words from a king and his granddaughter. That'll do it for this edition of Studio 5. Until next time, reach out and touch me. That's from Graham on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat. And then you, be sure to come on back and see where Studio 5 takes you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.